and welcome to Journey to Justice. I'm Eiko Kosasa, your host. Recently, I interviewed Warden Kawika Patterson of the Women's Community Correctional Center. He is changing the way prisons are being looked at and run, from a punitive institution to a uhonua, a place of healing. I began the interview by asking him where he was born and raised.
The beginning of my life um, began in Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Oh.
That's where I was born. Um, Both my parents are Native Hawaiian, but my father was in the military. It was at Fort Sill where he learned his specialty in artillery. And at that time, that's where I was born. So we have a lot of old film of Native Americans holding me and dancing and with all the feathers. And when I was growing up, my older brothers and sisters, every time we'd watch those videos, they would always tell me that I was taken off the reservation and brought back to Hawaii, you know? And they always, up until about 9 years old, I actually went up to my mom and I said, "Am I really your son?" You know?
Wow.
But
They did a good job on you.
oh yeah, they're way. I mean, the one right above me is like 5 years, so they're way older than I am. So,
Yeah.
Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Wow. So did you go to school there or
I
did you-
believe I always share with people that I remember. Well, I know I was born in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I remember being stationed in Schweinfurt, Germany, in the late '60s, and I remember we leaving Germany. My father got stationed in California in Anaheim, which was great because we went to Disneyland every other day. And then my father had got his orders for Vietnam. And then when he got those orders, he sent us all home. And then that's my time in Hawaii.
And you were like how old?
I believe I was 7.
So you still elementary
Yeah,
school.
7 years old when,
Yeah.
when Dad went to Vietnam.
Oh, so then you just stayed here, went to high school.
Yeah, we moved in with my grandmother who was living in Makaha. And I went to Makaha Elementary. I was the weirdest kid there because I spoke English
Standard English.
and I had shoes and collared shirts. And by the time I learned how to wear slippers, I begged my parents to let me wear slippers because everybody had slippers. 2 years later, I got accepted into Kamehameha.
Ah, yeah.
Okay, so I started Kamehameha in the 4th grade. And again, I went through another cultural shock because then they didn't let me wear slippers. And then they wanted me to wear collared shirts again.
Ah.
So that's
yeah.
the kind of my childhood was at that time. And so I did 9 years at Kamehameha.
Wow. So that means what? You graduated.
I graduated from Kamehameha. Being from a military background, I enrolled right out of graduation. I went to basic in Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I went to school in a military college called New Mexico Military Institute.
Wow.
That's in Roswell, New Mexico. And no, I didn't see any space aliens
I was just
or
thinking
anything
that.
like that. But Roswell is in the boonies,
Yeah. Yeah.
desert as far as the eye could see. It was a really great experience for me. And then I graduated from there. And then I ended up at Florida State University.
And
I received my degree in criminology.
Oh, okay.
So I returned home, and the first year was hard because nobody was looking. My original intent was to go into some type of federal law enforcement. So I was really looking at the Secret Service. But when we got out of college, Reagan had frozen a lot of the federal jobs, so nobody was hiring. And so corrections had put up. They were hiring. They were the only ones hiring. So I put in and I got hired.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So that's how I ended up in corrections.
Yeah. So how did you come to political consciousness? Because I want to come to you being a warden, but you know, things changed beforehand. I mean, I know for you.
I was always sharing with you earlier. There are so much things that you learn in the 70s in our history classes and whatnot in Kamehameha about what happened in the Hawaiian government, the
Right.
monarchy and things like
Yeah.
that. And if you remember, the 70s is when we've seen a lot of the activism.
Right.
So I was one of those, like my generation, that was watching it on the couch,
Oh,
watching it
yeah.
on TV, watching the people being bulldozed off their land, being arrested. My older brother, very instrumental, began a
Kaleo.
Khalil
Kaleo
Patterson.
Patterson.
Kahu
Yeah.
Khalil
Yes.
Patterson was very active in the sovereignty movement in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I remember being shocked when he would get arrested, you know, and that I began to learn why he was doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the history became more real for me in that sense of political awareness. Yeah, that was my entry into becoming politically aware because that's such a broad subject.
Yeah.
How do you become politically aware? So I began with the Hawaiian community.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the issues that we have with them in the political sense.
Right. And
Right.
earlier you were saying he was getting arrested. It was like protesting against the military.
Yes. Yes.
But what did you think? Because you were a military family, you grew up. And
Well, it was interesting watching my dad's expressions and my dad's. My dad worked 20 years in the Army, then he worked 20 years for the Navy. So he did 40 years
Yeah.
in the military. And but he supported my brother full on. At that time, my brother was protesting the missile launches at Barking Sands on the island of Kauai.
Quite. Yeah.
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 And you later learn that a lot of that stuff is kind of staged
What
because
do
you
you mean?
talk about it that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
gonna do this, well we have to arrest you, but this is what we're gonna do when we arrest you. So it's like a planned event, which is cool,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And people who don't know that, they think it's real, it's happening, it's oh my god, but then that's another awareness that you get.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you plan if you're going to get arrested. Those who are going to get arrested going to
Yeah.
do this. Those who aren't going to do this.
Because you don't want nobody to get hurt, and
Yeah.
and both sides do that. So
Yeah.
it's community participation, government participation. That's when you really become aware
Yeah.
of how things are done,
Yeah.
just
yeah.
to get something into the court to be discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
So, but at least it's working together.
Yeah. Yeah.
know?
Okay.
So that was one way I became into the political awareness,
Yeah.
watching my brother.
So, okay. And then we'll go to, so you were into the corrections, right?
Yes.
And so you were what, like a guard or
I always shared
administration?
that. No, I was line officer.
Oh.
Yeah. So I entered as a correctional officer, and by the second or third year, I was so entrenched because when the federal jobs became open, I actually looked at it and I said, you know what, I'm going to stay here. You know, I'm going to stay in this profession.
Yeah.
And from day one, my goal was to become a warden. Okay. So those of us that graduate from Kamehameha, it's always drilled into us on our last year that you have gotten what you've gotten from the princess. Yeah. So your life is how do you give back to her for what she's given you.
Yeah.
So I
yeah.
chose corrections. And I in my mind, I said, I will work in corrections for the forgotten sons of Hawaii.
Wow.
You know, that was my thing. Okay, this is where I'm going to stay.
That's political consciousness. Yeah.
I guess it is.
Yeah, you're looking here from the high school.
Because
to
even back
this.
then in the late 80s, the Hawaiians were predominantly the numbers in the prison system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you say that, and if you go along the lines that the largest concentration of Native Hawaiians are on the west coast of the island of Oahu, that's where I was raised.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So a lot of it ties into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Okay.
To make those things. So I stayed on the line for 12 years
Wow.
as a correctional officer. And mind you, I never talked about my college education and things like that. I just went to work. I did leave Hawaii and I worked in the mainland for about 3 years in the state of Nevada Department of Prisons. So I do have that experience under my belt as well. Different culture, different
Yeah.
type of prison system, way worse than what we know in Hawaii.
Really?
That's where I learned a lot, big time. you know.
Learned, like, what do you mean? Like on.
A lot of the issues in the correctional systems that where I worked at was culture. Was not. Was, there's no. How do I say it? I've never seen hate until I went into those prison systems. Yeah, real hate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was either you was white, black, or brown. Yeah, brown being Mexican.
Yeah.
So those hatreds played out in the prison system. Yeah. So you had to stand by your race. Yeah, and I've never seen, when you come into Hawaii and you tell, oh, that's a Japanese or that's a Chinese, that's really not a hate statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until you go to the mainland when these
Identification.
guys are really hating the other race, and in my mind I'm like, I don't understand that.
But how did they look at you as the guard?
I was neutral because I was neither any of those. So what did that mean? That mean that I could go anywhere among the staff as well as the inmate population and resolve issues because they knew I wasn't tied to anybody.
Yeah.
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 And so I got the reputation of being the peacemaker.
Oh.
Yeah, because I didn't belong to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. But this is what you're just saying now, and with your older brother, Kaleo, it's like a spiritual type of view you already have just to be the peacemaker. And
Oh yeah.
so did that come from your parents or your grandparents or how?
I'll go a little way back.
Okay.
Well, and this is how I explain it.
Okay.
So my grandfather, in the last years of the Queen, which was like 1916, 1917, my grandfather came from Makawao, Maui to Oahu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he actually joined the United States Army during World War One.
Okay.
Okay, and my grandmother came from Wailuku. They met in Honolulu.
Okay.
My grandmother started attending Kaumakapili Church.
Oh.
Okay,
Yeah.
so she pulled my grandfather in. They got married. They raised their children. So my mother was raised at Kaumakapili. So she met my father.
Supported the Queen, right?
Yeah. So Kaumakapili has been our spiritual home, right?
Okay.
So we can trace our ancestors back to when the first missionaries came. So we still worship in what is known as the Kailua tradition of Christianity, which is the
what?
Calvinist. The Calvinist missionaries that came in 1820.
Yeah.
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 So when you look at the Kailua tradition, you're looking at churches like Kaumakapili, Kauai Ha'o, Central Union, Makiki Christian, a lot of the churches that are still affiliated, what is now known today as the United Church of Christ.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Oh, okay.
Those are the descendants of the missionary churches.
Okay.
So a lot of my spirituality comes out of that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
My great-grandfather was a known UCC minister on Molokai, Kahunapule, Isaac Iaya. Yeah. So we've had several ministers in our family.
Yeah. Okay, because that's informing sort of like you when you're in the prison, like when you're staying in Nevada, because you didn't have to choose, I'm going to be the peacemaker, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But you kind of did that.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. So then you come back and you just like are a guard at Halava?
I just worked in Halava. I was there before Halava opened. Okay. We were at the high facility. Then the medium opened.
Yeah.
And then we were brand new. We went into the medium. We started off with about 200-300, and then they just started bringing them in. 10 years later, maybe not even 10. 8 years later, there's 1,600 inmates in the prison that was built for 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was still working the line. It was really horrible situation. You just had 3 men in a cell. It was me watching like 175, 200 guys. It was a lot of tension, a lot of fights, a lot of deaths.
Yeah.
And it was bad all around. And then we started shipping them out to the mainland.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I always thought in that time, if I ever was in a position of authority, this is what I would do. And that was like 95 and 96.
Yeah. Okay.
So in '99, I finally put in for promotion, and I made sergeant.
Uh-huh.
And then in 2000, I made lieutenant. And in 2002, I became a captain.
Okay.
Okay, so I kind of jumped
Yeah,
real
yeah,
quick
yeah, yeah, yeah. Those are really fast.
once I started moving.
Yeah.
And then in 2002, I was promoted actually at OCCC as a captain. In 2005, I went back to Halava. And then in 2006, as I explained to people, God false cracked me. Because I came to work one day, and the warden said, starting tomorrow, you will be the acting chief of security for the Women's Community Correctional Center. And I remember looking at my warden and I'm saying, what did I do wrong? You know, I had no idea about females.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
So you're looking at this like a punishment or
Yeah,
something.
you know, I didn't. I'm like, I want to be the warden of Halava, you know.
Yeah.
And I went there, and then within probably a few weeks, I was just totally amazed at what I saw. Both pros and cons,
Yeah.
but mostly about all those things that you kept stuffed in your head about what you would do if you had authority.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and finding out that the female, as an offender, is so different than the male. Yeah, in the sense that they're more acceptable for programming and opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when I accepted that position, and I just stayed.
Yeah.
And I think within 6 months, I was the acting warden.
Wow. Right. I heard you speak at the HPU talk, and you were giving stats about the women. You were saying like 95% who are here were like nonviolent
Yes,
crime.
that's actually a national statistic.
Wow.
Yeah, the crimes are nonviolent.
Yeah, the crimes are nonviolent.
Crimes are
Yeah.
nonviolent.
Yeah.
So you have to look at it in terms of Halava Correctional Facility was built as a state-of-the-art correctional facility, basically to house violent men. Yeah. But when you look at women, do they really need to have the same type of? Because they're non-violent, we want to house them like men.
Yeah.
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 Too often we use how we handle men to handle the women,
Yeah.
and so we create the women negative attitudes and behaviors because we're trying to treat them like men.
Oh.
Yeah. So we make
Yeah.
them worse than they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I realize with all the violence that I've seen in my career that they're really not that violent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I can actually narrow down to why when we do have those fights, what they're about.
Wow.
Yeah? And so it's how do we assure that they don't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I know you brought in the idea of uhonua, right?
Yes.
Like a refuge. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay. And it was kind of along these lines because I came in here and it really reignited my career. So I started studying about females and offenders.
Uh-huh.
So just for the females out there who may not like men, I'm not an expert on females. So I just saying what I learned from reading correctional material, and
Yeah.
I've had some training at the National Institute of Correction on female gender matters and female offenders. So when you look at the pathways that women take, lack of education, no employable skills, poor and ineffective relationships, that's children, family, significant others,
Okay.
and then substance abuse.
Right. Okay.
Most women have all of that are here. And when you talk about substance abuse, which are 90% of the crimes being drug or drug related because the women are addicts, 75% of those women suffer trauma. Okay? So substance abuse becomes a means of medicating those internal feelings that they can't deal with. Okay?
Right.
So once I understood that trauma was a key component in all the women here, we switched to what we call a trauma-informed care system. Yeah,
Okay.
where we focused on the trauma.
like social, what kind of trauma?
Trauma,
Or
you're talking
just-
about physical, you're talking about mental, verbal, and of course sexual. Not a single event,
Yeah.
but events that occurred with the women over a long period of time.
Yeah.
And normally between the ages of 4 and 17. Yeah, that's crucial. Yeah, because at first you go, how can you say that, right? And so we did a study here, and the first 25 women that came in, we had this new screening instrument on trauma assessment. And sure enough, the majority of them was between the ages of 4 and 17. So that was a real statistic
Yeah.
that's still being played out.
Yeah.
So you understand that there are societal issues out there that are occurring within our family homes that very few people know about, is why women enter into the criminal justice, or enter into a life of substance abuse,
Yeah.
and then eventually into the criminal justice system.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Because they haven't developed a means of coping with the issues
Yeah. Yeah.
that they have.
Well, that makes sense.
So
yeah.
every woman is different.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I was training with a lot of the wardens from the other facilities, I met a warden that told me, he asked me, do you have a predominantly female workforce? And I said, yes, I do. He said, understand everything that you're learning now for the women offenders, you can apply to your staff. You know, and I was like, what? He said, yeah, this is not just for one group, it's for all women.
Yeah. It's societal
Yeah,
problems.
it's a societal problem. It's just that
Yeah.
your women have developed means to deal with it so they can function
Yeah.
in society. Women in the criminal justice system have not developed those skills. So you have to teach it to them.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's the whole mode that we went to at this facility in terms of trauma-informed care.
Right. But then, at the same time, uhonua.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I'm learning all of this, I said, oh my God, it sounds like a sanctuary. You know,
Yeah.
this sounds like a sanctuary. So I went to one of my spiritual advisors, I call him that, from school, Kaupu. David Kaupu used to be the minister at Kamehameha.
Oh, okay.
And I sat down with him and I started talking to him about uhonua, about how individuals in ancient times that had broken, cardinal rules that might cause them to be killed would run to the sanctuary, uhonua, and then once they get inside the walls, no one can touch them. Yeah, and then eventually they was released, and when they're released, nobody can touch them because something happens in there. I didn't know about that much knowledge.
Yeah.
So I asked him to bring that up to today in modern context and tell me, how do you interpret that? So he said, as the women come to you, into your walls, they are forgiven for their sins. Yeah. And then your job is how do you teach them to live a forgiven life? And so that has been the underlying goal for me,
Yeah.
is to tell them it's okay, you're here because of your crime. Now I'm going to teach you how to live with your crime. Yeah. How to live a forgiven life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And be productive again.
Yeah. So you have, I know, different programs like Tony Vicent, she comes in, right?
Right.
And they do like lectures and I don't know exactly what.
There is no one program that's going to solve everything I just
Right.
told you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you bring in different.
So no woman, every woman here goes through a different path to her own transformation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for the most part, most women will refuse treatment
Oh.
for
Okay.
the sole purpose of not having to deal with the issue. So
Yeah.
they built their walls up, and they ain't gonna destroy them.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of our activities here designed to break the walls down.
Oh.
And every staff, from my case management to security, the cooks, the janitors, they all have a goal of trying to break those walls down so the woman accepts treatment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the basis of once they get into treatment, they finish. Normally, like Hinamako is like 12 to 18 months, 24/7. They graduate or they finish it, then they move on.
Yeah.
They go into our work furlough programs and eventually parole.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's the concept of our pu'uhonua.
Yeah.
is in making them face their trauma issues. And then the second one, which is almost as important as the first one, is helping them to rebuild the bridges that they burnt with their families and trying to reunite them with their children.
Wow. Wow. That one is important because when they're released to go back into society.
Children is the means to their success, unless they totally lost them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, the women don't lose children because they come to prison. They lose the children during their addiction. That is normally before the criminal justice system.
Yeah. In the prison monologues, one of the women talked about that, with their child. Yeah, there's some kind of relationship like that. Oh.
I think one of the women she hasn't seen her children like in 13 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I try not to think about it because there's a lot of them like that here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of them will tell you, it's not one or two. It's like 5 or 6 or 7, When they tell you numbers like that, you're just totally amazed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why is that? And the reason why that's key, and this is the political awareness part.
Okay.
Okay. And where I've becoming an advocate with the prison monologue is that 65% of these children will go to jail. That's a national statistic.
Yeah.
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 And so if we cannot look at those societal issues a little bit more closer, these children will keep our criminal justice system working.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because they're coming. We're just
Right.
it's intergenerational.
Right.
It just keeps
Right.
on going because we're not trying to stop it.
Right.
And
so with that, I know you work with different community groups because you're trying to address so that the cycle doesn't continue.
All different types of aspect that surrounds the trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, we have a program called Huikahi. Huikahi is making the group one. Yeah. So we'll have a woman come in. It's originally designed for her to come in and have her crime partners or her victims come in to have some kind of understanding. We don't like to say apology or forgiveness or anything like that, but just to put them both together so whatever the issue was between them can let go. Hawaiians say no ho'oponopono. We call it a restorative justice circle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's also designed to bring family in because she burnt a lot of bridges with her family.
Yeah.
And so they talk about, what I did, what you did, how can we together make it better for when I get out.